I think what we're seeing is actually an acceptance of our socialist nature. We have to recognize that we cannot do well by our people of this country without it.
What they're teaching in these schools, they're completely avoiding the actual factual history of what we went through to get to where we are, like with capitalism, the free markets.
Young people have a lot of debt going on right now, and they don't have a lot of money. It's the same old story. If you don't have a lot of money, you want people with money to give you freebies. If you have money, you have to have a very special soul to be willing to go away. There's something to be said for Bernie. He is uplifting his voter base and asking them to come together and be responsible for one another as people.
Who would have thought that in America there would arise a major presidential candidate who was an out-and-out socialist?
We must create an economy that works for all, not just the very wealthy.
Who would think that outright socialists like Bernie Sanders, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and others would be supported by so many young people?
One of the things that occurs to me is that the people like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and many of her generation, not to be disparaging, but they were like, she herself was born a month after the Soviet Union fell and the wall collapsed in Berlin. She has no frame of reference. She didn't live under a Cold War. She never has lived personally in a world where communism was oppressive to as many people. If she would go to Venezuela, if she would go to Cuba, and to the few places on the earth where they're still trying to make it work, and stay there long enough and talk to the people, maybe she would see.
Some people claim that the Bible teaches socialism. It does not. It teaches charity, which is voluntary, not coercive. Socialism is a form of theft by the government. Socialism stokes the flames of envy and covetousness. Socialism violates at least 2 of the 10 commandments: thou shalt not steal and thou shalt not covet.
So there's a great move today called progressivism. And it's really another label for socialism, but I think it's a better descriptor, because what progressives believe is that society as it is isn't really good enough, that we can progressively be better. And eventually, we as individuals and as a culture can become perfect. They believe in the perfectibility of man, the perfectibility of culture. But at the foundational level of socialism and progressivism is the lack of understanding of the sinful nature of man. That's the problem. And that's what we have got to be talking about.
Some critics of socialism note that one of the biggest drawbacks is that it essentially destroys innovation and initiative.
We all want the opportunity to advance. We all want the opportunity to fulfill our potential. And those are the things that conservative policies ensure, and that things like socialism obviously take away freedom and take away your opportunity to advance or to be fulfilled.
So what you have here is, first of all, massive income and wealth inequality. And as a nation, we have got to think from a moral perspective and an economic perspective whether we think it is appropriate that 3 people, 1, 2, 3, own more wealth than the bottom half of the American society.
What most Americans can't really get their hands around is that when socialism takes root, the only way that they can keep people within that very closed system is to murder several million of them as an example of the rest of them, you better stay in line. So socialism doesn't work where people make up their own minds and pick their jobs and pick their spouses and pick their places to live and which brand of cereal they're going to have. It works when the government gives you extraordinary limitations, and if you don't like those, they kill you.
Some experts note that the breakdown of the family is one of the factors contributing toward the rise of socialism in America.
What we're finding is that traditional married homes with children in them, they typically vote conservatively and to the right. And on the other end of the spectrum, the never marrieds and the cohabitating, the divorce, they primarily vote socialist. Family, children, marriage, it's all tied to becoming a conservative. It's an important threshold to becoming a conservative.
In Romania, we lost our freedom because we were conquered by the boots of Russians, and my ancestors, my relatives, were too afraid to speak up against them. I believe in America, we are losing our freedom because we as Christians are afraid to speak up. And that's dangerous. There is no reason for us to be afraid. America and American people brought Christ and freedom to people all over the world. It's time for us, Americans, to bring Christ and freedom back to America, because there is no freedom, now even in America, without Christ.